Hey everyone, tonight we're going to step into something that seems impossibly distant and yet strangely intimate. A world of stone and sun, of gods who walked among men, of a river that gave life to millions across thousands of years. We're talking about ancient Egypt, but not the Egypt of museum displays and documentary narration. We're going to walk through it, slowly, carefully, the way you might walk through a dream that feels more real and waking. So if you're settling in for the night, maybe go ahead and hit that like button if you feel like it, subscribe if this is the kind of thing you want more of, and drop a comment letting me know where you are in the world right now and what time it is. It's always amazing to see who's drifting off in Tokyo while someone else is just waking up in Berlin. All of us connected by these strange threads of curiosity about the past. Now, get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Let your breathing slow down just a little. And let's begin this journey together, back through time, back to the banks of the Nile. Imagine for a moment that you don't know what year it is. You have no calendar on your wall, no phone telling you it's Tuesday. Instead, you know time by the river. You know that the waters are rising as they do every year, transforming the landscape from brown dust to dark, fertile mud. You know this because you can see it, smell it, feel it in the moisture of the air. This is Akhet, the season of inundation, when the Nile swells with rains from mountains you've never seen, far to the south in lands you know only from travelers' tales. The flood comes like clockwork, more reliable than any human promise, and it has come this way for longer than anyone can remember, for thousands of years before you were born, and it will come for thousands of years after you're gone. Though you don't think in those terms, you think in harvests, in generations, in the spans between one king's death and another's coronation. You live in a small village, not one of the great cities like Memphis or Thebes, but a cluster of mud brick homes along the river's edge, surrounded by fields that will soon be underwater. Your house is simple but not uncomfortable. The walls are thick, plastered with mud and painted white to reflect the brutal heat of the sun. The roof is flat, made of palm logs covered with reed mats and more mud, packed down hard. In the hottest months, you sleep up there under the stars. But now, with the flood coming, you stay inside where it's cooler. The floor is packed earth, swept clean every day by your sister or your wife or your daughter, whoever's turn it is. There's not much furniture, not like you'd recognize it anyway. A few low stools, some woven reed mats, ceramic pots of various sizes for storing grain, oil, water, beer. Everything has its place, and everything is used until it breaks, then mended until it can't be mended anymore. Then the pieces are repurposed into something else. Nothing is wasted in a world where everything comes from the earth and the river and the labor of human hands. You wake before dawn, not because you set an alarm, but because your body has learned over years that this is when you wake. The air is still cool, almost cold against your skin. Outside, you can hear the first sounds of the village stirring. A baby crying, someone coughing, the soft shuffle of feet on dirt paths, the distant bray of a donkey. The darkness is just beginning to thin at the edges, that deep blue-black of pre-dawn that's not quite night anymore but not yet day. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face, feeling the grit of sleep in your eyes. Your back aches a little, the way it always does now. You're not old, not by the standards of your village, maybe 35 or 40, but the work has worn you down in small ways. Your hands are calloused, your skin weathered dark by the sun, your joints stiff in the mornings until you move around and they loosen up. There's a routine to the morning, as there is to everything. First, you step outside to relieve yourself in the designated area at the edge of the village, a spot that's regularly cleaned and buried. Then you walk down to the river, just a few dozen paces from your door, and you splash water on your face, rinse your mouth, run wet hands through your hair. The water is cool and silty, full of the rich sediment that makes the land so fertile. You cup your hands and drink, the taste familiar, slightly earthy, the taste of life itself. Around you, others are doing the same, men and women both, and there's a comfortable silence. The shared ritual of washing, of greeting the day and the river that gives you everything. By the time you return to your house, the sky is lighter, streaked with pink and gold. Your wife is awake now, crouched by the bread oven outside the door, coaxing the embers from last night back to life. She adds a few pieces of dried dung, the fuel you've been collecting and drying for months, and soon there's a small fire crackling. The smell of smoke mingles with the smell of the river and the damp earth. She mixes fletter and water into dough, her hands working quickly, practiced. This is bread, the staff of life, what you eat every single day. Sometimes with onions or beans or a bit of fish if someone had luck yesterday, but mostly just bread. The dough is shaped into flat rounds and slapped onto the inside of the hot clay oven, where it bakes quickly, puffing up and browning. Within minutes, she's pulling out the first loaves, and you tear into one while it's still hot, the crust crispy, the inside soft and chewy. It's simple, but after a night of not eating, it tastes perfect. You eat sitting on a stool outside your door, watching the village come fully to life. Children run past, already playing some game that involves a lot of shouting and a stick. A neighbor leads a goat toward the common grazing area. An old man sits in his doorway, same spot he sits every morning, watching the world with eyes that have seen more floods, more harvests, more births and deaths than you can imagine. He nods at you, and you nod back. No words are needed. You've known each other your entire life. He knew your father, your grandfather. He'll probably be here, in that same spot, until the day he isn't. And then someone else will sit there and watch the world turn. After eating, there's a moment of transition. The day is beginning in earnest now, the sun climbing above the horizon, and with it comes the heat that will build and build until midday, when the world seems to shimmer, and even the insects go quiet. But that's hours away. Right now, there's work to do. If it were the season of Peret, the growing season, you'd be heading to the fields to plant or tend the crops. If it were Shimu, the harvest season, you'd be cutting grain from dawn to dusk, your back bent, your hands bleeding from the sharp stalks. But now, during Akhet, the fields are flooding or already underwater, and the work is different. Some men are called to labor on the great projects, the temples and tombs and monuments that the king commands. This year it's not your turn, or maybe you've already served your time. The weeks or months of hauling stone or digging or carrying water to the workers. Either way, today your work is here, in the village, and it's the work of maintenance, of survival, of preparing for the seasons to come. You spend the morning repairing the roof of your house, which leaked during a rare rainstorm last week. You climb up with a basket of mud mixed with straw, and you pack it into the cracks, smoothing it down with your hands. It's tedious work, but necessary. A roof that leaks is a roof that will eventually collapse, and then where would you be? Below you, life continues. Your wife is grinding grain, pushing a heavy stone back and forth over another stone, crushing the kernels into flour. It's work that takes hours every day, work that wears down her wrists and shoulders, but it has to be done. Without flour, there's no bread. Without bread, there's no life. Your daughter, maybe 8 or 9 years old, is helping or trying to. She's learning by watching, by imitating the way all children learn. No one sits her down and explains how to grind grain. She just sees her mother doing it every day, and eventually she tries, and her mother corrects her gently, shows her the right rhythm, the right pressure, and slowly, over months and years, she becomes competent, then skilled. Nearby, a group of boys are practicing with throw sticks, simple wooden tools shaped like boomerangs that are used to hunt birds in the marshes. They're not very good yet, their throws wild and uncoordinated, but they're learning. And their fathers watch with a mix of amusement and critical assessment. One day, those boys will be men, and they'll need to know how to bring home a duck or a goose to supplement the endless bread and onions. One day, they'll be the ones repairing roofs and serving the king's labor and watching their own sons fumble with throw sticks. By midday, the heat is oppressive. The sun is directly overhead, and there's no shade except inside the houses or under the few palm trees scattered around the village. Work stops. You can't work in this heat, not safely, so you retreat indoors into the cool dimness of your home, and you lie down on a mat and close your eyes. This is the siesta, though you don't call it that, you just call it the hot time, the time when you rest and wait for the world to become bearable again. Around you, the village is quiet. Even the children have stopped running, even the dogs lie panting in whatever shadow they can find. The only sounds are the distant murmur of the river, always there, always moving, and the occasional buzz of a fly. You drift in and out of sleep, not quite awake, not quite dreaming. Images float through your mind. The feel of mud under your hands, the taste of bread, the face of your father who died when you were young, teaching you to tie a knot in a rope. You remember the last time the flood was too high, and water came into the houses, and everyone had to move to higher ground for a week, living in makeshift shelters, waiting for the water to recede. You remember a festival, drums and dancing, beer flowing freely, a sense of joy that felt almost dangerous in its intensity. You remember the birth of your first child, the fear and the relief, and the overwhelming strangeness of suddenly being responsible for this tiny, fragile life. When you wake, the sun has moved. It's mid-afternoon now, and the heat, while still intense, has lost its sharp edge. You sit up, drink some water from a clay jar, splash a little on your face. Outside, the village is stirring again. Women are returning from the river with water jars balanced on their heads, moving with a grace that seems effortless, but is really the product of years of practice. Men are gathering in small groups, talking, making plans for the next day's work. Children are playing again, their energy apparently limitless. You walk to the edge of the village, to the fields that are now submerged under a few inches of water. This is the magic time. The time when the river does the work for you. The water brings not just moisture, but silt, rich dark sediment from far upstream, and when it recedes in a few weeks, it will leave behind a layer of fresh soil, incredibly fertile, ready to grow anything. This is why Egypt exists. This is why your people have thrived here for thousands of years, while other lands struggle with drought or flood or barren soil. The river gives and gives and gives, every year, like clockwork, and in return you give it your reverence, your gratitude, your very identity. You are the people of the Nile. Without it, you are nothing. Standing there, looking out over the water, glinting in the afternoon sun, you feel something you don't have words for, a sense of connection maybe, to the land and the river and the endless cycle of flood and growth and harvest. A sense of your place in something larger than yourself. Your ancestors stood here and watched the flood come. Your children will stand here and watch it come. The kings in their palaces, the priests in their temples, the workers hauling stone for tombs that will outlast kingdoms. All of you are part of this civilization that has existed since time immemorial and will, as far as you can imagine, exist forever. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's slow down. Let's not rush through this life. Let's take our time and really look at what it means to live in this world, in this time, in this place where the boundaries between the human and the divine are thin, where the king is a god and the gods walk among men, where death is not an end, but a transformation, and where the work of your hands might last for millennia. Let's start with the river itself, because everything starts with the river. If you were to trace the Nile from its sources in the highlands of Ethiopia and the Great Lakes of Central Africa, you'd travel thousands of miles through landscapes of incredible diversity, mountains, rainforests, savannas, deserts, but you don't know any of this. You know the river as it is here, in Egypt, flowing north through a narrow green valley carved into an ocean of sand. From above, if you could see it from a bird's perspective, Egypt would look like a thin ribbon of green, sometimes only a few miles wide, sometimes broader where the valley opens up, but always surrounded by desert, by the red land as you call it, the land of chaos and death in contrast to the black land, the fertile soil that the river creates. This geography shapes everything. The vast majority of people live within a few miles of the river, clustered in villages like yours or in the great cities that serve as administrative and religious centers. Beyond the cultivation, beyond the green, there is almost nothing, just sand and rock and heat that can kill you in a day if you're unprepared. The desert is not empty exactly. There are oases, rare and precious. There are trade routes, paths that connect Egypt to Nubia in the south, to the Levant in the northeast, to Libya in the west. There are mining expeditions that venture into the Red Land to extract gold, copper, turquoise, semi-precious stones, but for most people, most of the time, the desert is a boundary, a barrier, a reminder of what life would be like without the river. The flood itself is a phenomenon that takes weeks to develop and weeks to recede. It begins sometime around what we would call July. Though you measure time differently, you notice first that the water, usually clear or slightly cloudy, becomes darker, thicker with sediment. The level starts to rise, slowly at first, then faster. Day by day, the river swells, spilling over its banks, creeping into the fields, transforming the landscape. At its peak, the flood can cover vast areas, creating an inland sea dotted with villages on slightly higher ground, looking like islands. This is not a disaster. This is the plan. This is what's supposed to happen. The key is prediction and management. Too little flood, and there won't be enough water for the crops. The land will be dry, the harvest poor, and famine will threaten. Too much flood, and the water can destroy villages, drown livestock, wash away the careful infrastructure of canals and dikes. So there are officials, priests, and scribes who keep records of the flood's height year after year, measuring it with nilometers, simple stone gauges that mark the water level. These measurements are crucial. They help predict the harvest, assess taxes, plan distributions of grain. They're also sacred, recorded in temple archives because the flood is not just a natural event. It's the will of the gods, the gift of Harpy, the god of the inundation, who brings abundance if he's pleased, disaster if he's not. And here we start to see how tightly woven together the practical and the spiritual are in your world. You don't think of the flood as a purely physical process, the result of distant rainfall and river hydrology. You think of it as divine, as the action of forces beyond human control, but not beyond human influence. You make offerings. You participate in festivals. You say prayers and perform rituals designed to ensure that Happy will be generous this year, that the flood will come at the right time, reach the right height, bring the right amount of silt. Whether or not these rituals actually affect the flood is, from your perspective, beside the point. They affect you. They give you a sense of agency in a world where so much is outside your control. They bind the community together in shared purpose. They connect you to the gods and to the king, who mediates between the human and divine realms. Speaking of the king, let's talk about Pharaoh, though that's not actually what you call him. The word Pharaoh comes from Pero, which means great house. Referring to the palace itself, you would say something like the king, or his majesty, or invoke one of the many titles and epithets that surround the royal person like armor. The king is not just a political leader, he is a god incarnate, the living Horus, the son of Ra, the guarantor of cosmic order. When he performs rituals, he's not just going through the motions, he's maintaining Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, and balance that keeps the universe from sliding back into chaos. This is a hard concept for modern minds to grasp. We're used to the idea of separation, church and state, the sacred and the secular, the personal and the political. But in your world, these categories don't exist. Everything is connected. The king's health affects the crops. His piety affects the flood. His victories over foreign enemies maintain the boundaries between order and chaos, between Egypt and the forces that would destroy it. When the king dies, it's a moment of profound danger. The living God has departed. The new king must be installed quickly, must take up the burden of divinity, must perform the rituals that prove he is worthy, that the gods accept him, that Ma'at will continue. You've never seen the king. He lives in a palace far away, in Memphis or Thebes or one of the other royal cities, surrounded by officials and priests and courtiers, but you know him nonetheless. You've heard stories. You've seen images of him on temple walls when you've travelled to the nearby town for a festival. You've participated in ceremonies that invoke his name, and you know that a portion of everything he produces every harvest ultimately belongs to him, collected as taxes stored in royal granaries, redistributed to feed the workers on the great projects, the army, the priesthood, the bureaucracy that keeps this vast civilization running. The taxes are not arbitrary. They're calculated based on the height of the flood, the expected yield of the fields. Scribes come to your village every year, measuring the land, assessing the crops, recording everything in their meticulous script on papyrus scrolls. These scribes are powerful men, educated, literate, members of an elite class. To be a scribe is to escape the back-breaking labor of the fields. It's to work with your mind instead of your hands, though the scribes themselves will tell you that their work is its own kind of labor, demanding, exacting, requiring years of training. You can't read or write. Almost no one in your village can. Literacy is a specialized skill, taught in schools attached to temples or administrative centers, passed down from master to apprentice. But you know numbers. You can count your sacks of grain, your jars of oil. You can keep track of debts and credits. Who owes you a day's labor, who you owe in return, and you know when the scribes are cheating, inflating the assessment to skim a little off the top for themselves. Everyone knows this happens. It's one of the injustices of life. Like the heat or the insects or the aching back, you complain about it quietly with your neighbors, but you pay what's demanded, because the alternative is punishment, beatings, confiscation of property, forced labor. Yet despite these burdens, or perhaps because of them, there's a stability to your life that's hard to appreciate from a modern perspective. You know your place. You know what's expected of you. You know that if you do your work, pay your taxes, honor the gods, you'll be taken care of in a basic sense. When the harvest fails, the royal granaries open. When there's a crisis, the system, for all its faults, has mechanisms to respond. It's not a perfect life. It's not an easy life, but it's a life that makes sense, that fits into a larger order, and there's comfort in that. Even as there's frustration and pain, let's shift now from the big structures, the river and the king and the taxes, down to the intimate details of daily life, because it's in the details that the past becomes real. It's one thing to say, ancient Egypt. It's another to think about what you ate for breakfast, what your house smelled like, what you did when your tooth ached, how you spent a quiet evening. Food, as we've touched on, is mostly bread and beer. This sounds monotonous, and in a way it is, but bread and beer are incredibly varied. There are different types of grain, emmer wheat, barley, each with its own flavor and texture. There are different baking methods, loaves baked in molds, flatbreads cooked on hot stones, bread enriched with honey or dates for special occasions. Beer is not like modern beer. It's thick, nutritious, slightly sweet, made by crumbling bread into water and letting it ferment. It's full of vitamins and calories, and it's safer to drink than water, which can carry disease. Everyone drinks beer, children included, though theirs is weaker. To this base of bread and beer, you add whatever else is available. Onions and garlic are common, eaten raw or cooked. Lentils, chickpeas, and fava beans provide protein, if you're lucky. There's fish from the river, either fresh or dried. The Nile is full of fish, perch, catfish, mullet, dozens of species, and they're a crucial part of the diet, especially for people who can't afford meat. Meat is a luxury. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, these are valuable, not to be slaughtered lightly. You might eat meat a few times a year, at festivals or after a successful hunt. When you do, it's a communal event, the animal butchered and shared, nothing wasted. The meat is roasted or boiled, the fat rendered, the organs eaten, the bones cracked for marrow, the hide tanned for leather. There are also wild foods, if you know where to look and have the time. Birds in the marshes, hunted with throw sticks or nets. Eggs from nests, if you can find them before someone else does. Wild vegetables and greens that grow along the riverbank. Lotus roots and seeds, which are edible and quite nutritious. Dates and figs when they're in season, sweet and rich, a special treat. Honey, rare and precious, collected from wild bees at great risk, used sparingly to sweeten bread or make medicine. Meals are simple and informal. You eat when you're hungry, when the work allows. There's no dining table, no set dinner time. You sit on the ground or on a stool. You tear off a piece of bread. You scoop up beans or fish with it. You eat with your hands, licking your fingers clean. Afterward, you rinse your hands and mouth with water. Cleanliness is important, not just for comfort, but for purity. You wash before eating, before praying, before entering a temple. You shave your body hair, not for fashion, but to avoid lice and fleas. You chew natron, a naturally occurring salt, to clean your teeth, and you use kohl around your eyes, not just for beauty, but to protect against the sun's glare and infections. Your clothing is simple, linen, woven from flax that grows in the fields. Linen is perfect for the climate, light and breathable. Men typically wear a short kilt, just a piece of linen wrapped around the waist and tied. Women wear a simple dress, a straight sheath that goes from chest to ankles. In the cooler months, you might add a shawl or cloak. The wealthy have finer linen, pleated and nearly transparent, and they have more of it, more changes of clothing. You have maybe 2 or 3 outfits which you wash in the river, pounding them on stones to get them clean, then spreading them in the sun to dry. When clothes wear out, you patch them until you can't patch them anymore. Then you repurpose the fabric into something else. Rags for cleaning, strips for bandages, wicks for lamps. Jewelry and adornment are important, even for ordinary people. You might have a simple amulet around your neck, a protective symbol, or a string of beads. Women wear earrings, bracelets, anklets if they can afford them, made from copper or faience, a glazed ceramic material in bright blues and greens. Cosmetics are not just for vanity, they're part of daily life, part of presenting yourself properly to the world and to the gods. Kohl for the eyes, made from ground minerals mixed with oil. Red ochre for the lips and cheeks, scented oils rubbed into the skin to protect against the sun and the dry air. Your house, as we mentioned, is made of mud brick, the most abundant building material available. The mud comes from the riverbank, mixed with straw to give it strength, shaped in wooden molds, and dried in the sun. Bricks are made by the thousands, and building a house is a community effort. Neighbors help each other, knowing that when they need to build or repair, others will help them in turn. The walls are thick to keep out the heat, plastered and whitewashed. The roof is flat, accessible by an external staircase or ladder used for storage, for sleeping, for drying food. Inside, the layout is simple. A main room where most of life happens, maybe a smaller room for sleeping or storage, a kitchen area outside or in a separate structure. There's no running water, no electricity, no glass in the windows, which are just small openings high on the walls to let in light and air while keeping out the direct sun. Lighting comes from oil lamps. Simple clay bowls with a wick floating in oil, usually castor oil or linseed oil. They give a soft flickering light, enough to see by but not much. Most activities that require good light, spinning, weaving, detailed craftwork, are done outside during the day. Evenings are for eating, for socializing, for telling stories, for sleep. Furniture is minimal. Stools, low tables, storage chests, sleeping mats, beds if you have one, are simple wooden frames with woven cord or leather straps, raised off the ground to avoid insects and dampness. A headrest, a curved piece of wood that supports your neck, is used instead of a pillow. It seems uncomfortable at first, but you get used to it, and it keeps your head cool and elevated. Everything in the house is handmade, either by you or by someone you know, or traded for something you made. There's no concept of mass production, no identical objects churned out by machines. Every pot, every basket, every stool is slightly different, bearing the marks of the hands that made it. And what about health, illness, injury? You live in a world without antibiotics, without surgery as we know it, without an understanding of germs or viruses. Yet you're not helpless. There is medical knowledge accumulated over centuries, passed down through practitioners who are part doctor, part priest, part magician. They know how to set broken bones, how to stitch wounds, how to make poultices and ointments from plants and minerals. They have remedies for common ailments, stomach troubles, fevers, skin infections, headaches. Some of these remedies work. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, and it's used for pain and fever. Honey has antibacterial properties and is applied to wounds. Garlic is used for infections. Other remedies are less effective, based on ideas about how the body works that don't match reality but give comfort and sometimes produce a placebo effect. And many treatments are explicitly magical. Spells recited over the patient, amulets placed on the body, rituals performed to drive out the demons or evil spirits believed to cause disease. The line between medicine and magic is blurry, and from your perspective, both are necessary. You go to the healer because he knows the herbs, but also because he knows the spells. You wear an amulet because it might protect you and because everyone wears them, and because it connects you to the gods and to the community's shared understanding of how protection works. When a child is sick, you do everything you can. You give them the medicine, you say the prayers, you make offerings at the local shrine, and you wait, hoping that the fever will break, that the gods will be merciful. Many children don't survive to adulthood. Infant mortality is high. infections, malnutrition, accidents, childhood diseases that we now prevent with vaccines. All of these claim lives. It's a pain that every parent knows, the loss of a child, and it's woven into the fabric of life. You don't love your children less because you might lose them. If anything, you hold them tighter, knowing how fragile life is. And when death comes, as it inevitably does, you have rituals to make sense of it, to honor the dead, to ensure their journey to the afterlife. Burial practices vary depending on wealth and status. The king and the elite are mummified, their bodies preserved with natron and resins, wrapped in linen, placed in elaborate tombs filled with goods for the afterlife. You can't afford that. When someone in your family dies, the body is washed, wrapped in a simple linen shroud, and buried in a grave at the edge of the desert, beyond the reach of the flood. A few possessions might be buried with them, a favorite pot, a tool, some food for the journey. The grave is marked with a stone or a simple stela if you can afford it. Prayers are said, offerings are made, and the deceased joins the ancestors, who are still part of the family, still honored and remembered. The afterlife is real to you, more real than any abstract concept of heaven. It's the field of reeds, a place like Egypt but perfect, where the crops are always abundant, the weather always pleasant, where you'll be reunited with those you've lost. But getting there requires passing through the duat, the underworld, facing trials and judgments. The heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart is heavy with sin, it's devoured by Amit, a demon who is part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. If the heart is pure, the deceased is welcomed into paradise. This belief shapes how you live. You try to live in accordance with Ma'at, to be honest, fair, kind, to fulfill your obligations. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because the afterlife depends on it. The tomb inscriptions of the wealthy often include a negative confession, a list of sins the deceased claims not to have committed. I have not killed, I have not stolen, I have not caused pain, I have not made anyone weep. You don't have a tomb inscription, but you know these principles. They're taught by parents, by priests, by the stories everyone shares. They're the moral framework of your world. But life is not all work and worry and preparing for death. There is joy, pleasure, leisure. There are festivals, and they are frequent and elaborate, breaking up the year into cycles of celebration. The Opet Festival, the beautiful Feast of the Valley, the Festival of Drunkenness, dozens of others, each with its own rituals, processions, feasting, music, dancing. During a festival, work stops. The temples open their doors. Statues of the gods are carried through the streets on sacred barks, shaded by canopies, surrounded by priests burning incense, musicians playing sistrums and drums, crowds singing and clapping. You join the procession, caught up in the energy, the sense of collective euphoria. Beer flows freely, provided by the temple or by wealthy patrons. Food is distributed. There's singing and dancing, not formal performances but spontaneous, everyone participating, children and elders, men and women. The music is hypnotic, repetitive rhythms that build and build until you're not thinking, just moving, just feeling. For a few hours or a few days, the normal order is suspended. You can drink too much, laugh too loud, dance until you're exhausted. It's catharsis, release, a necessary break from the relentless routine. And then there's the quiet leisure, the time spent at home or with friends. Men gather in the evenings to talk, to play games. Senet is popular, a board game with religious significance, a race to navigate your pieces through the squares which represent the journey through the afterlife. The rules are passed down orally, slightly different in every household. Bets are placed, not for money, which doesn't really exist in the way we think of it, but for favors, for goods, for bragging rights. Women have their own gatherings, spinning and weaving together, talking, sharing news and gossip, the social glue that holds the community together. Children play everywhere, inventing games with sticks and stones and balls made from leather or linen scraps. They play house, imitating their parents. They play at being scribes or soldiers or fishermen. Toys have been found in archaeological sites, dolls, wooden animals with movable parts, spinning tops, balls. Play is how children learn, how they prepare for adulthood. But it's also just fun. just the expression of energy and imagination that doesn't need a purpose. Music and storytelling are constant. There are professional musicians, singers and dancers who perform at the great houses and temples. But there's also informal music, songs sung while working, lullabies, love songs, drinking songs. Instruments include the sistrum, a handheld rattle used in religious rituals, the harp played by skilled musicians, flutes made from reeds, drums of various sizes. The music is different from anything you'd recognize today. Different scales, different rhythms, but it serves the same functions: to express emotion, to bring people together, to mark time and transitions. Stories are told and retold, myths about the gods, tales of adventure, moral fables. The story of Osiris, murdered by his brother Set, resurrected by his wife Isis, becoming the lord of the underworld. The story of Ra's journey through the night, battling the serpent Apophis to ensure the sun rises again. The story of the contendings of Horus and Set, a cosmic battle for the throne of Egypt. These stories are not just entertainment, they're theology, history, cultural identity, all wrapped together. They explain why the world is the way it is, why the Nile floods, why death is not the end. Let's move now to the larger world, beyond your village. Because even though most of your life is lived within a few square miles, you're part of something vast. Egypt at this time, let's say around 1500 BCE, during the New Kingdom, is one of the great powers of the ancient world, a civilization that has already existed for over 1,000 years and will continue for another 1,000. It controls territory from Nubia in the south to parts of the Levant in the northeast. It trades with distant lands, Lebanon for cedar wood, Punt for incense and myrrh, the Aegean for olive oil and wine. Exotic goods flow into Egypt, and Egyptian goods, grain, gold, linen, papyrus, flow out. This trade is not conducted by private merchants in the way we might think. It's controlled by the state, by the palace and the temples. Expeditions are organized by royal decree. Caravans and ships are sent out under official supervision. The goods are brought back and distributed according to a complex system of redistribution. The king gives gifts to his officials, who give gifts to their subordinates, who give gifts to those subordinates, who give gifts to those below them. A cascade of obligation and loyalty that binds the whole system together. But you, in your village, see only the faintest echoes of this. Maybe once a caravan passes through, traders heading south with grain to exchange for gold and ivory. Maybe a foreign sailor stops at the local town, and people talk about his strange appearance, his odd language. Maybe a piece of cedar wood ends up in the hands of a local craftsman, and he makes something beautiful and people wonder where such wood could possibly come from. What kind of tree is so tall and straight and fragrant? The great cities, Memphis, Thebes, are places you might visit once in your life, perhaps on pilgrimage, or if you're called to labor on a royal project. These cities are vast by ancient standards. Tens of thousands of people, massive temples that take your breath away, palaces surrounded by walls and gardens, markets where goods from across the known world are displayed. Walking through a city like Thebes, you'd be overwhelmed by the noise, the crowds, the sheer density of humanity. You'd see priests in their white linen robes, their heads shaved. You'd see soldiers, foreigners, slaves, scribes carrying their papyrus scrolls and writing equipment. You'd smell incense from the temples, baking bread, roasting meat, the less pleasant smells of crowded streets without modern sanitation. The temples are the heart of these cities, enormous complexes dedicated to the gods, maintained by a permanent staff of priests and workers. The largest, like the Temple of Karnak, are among the biggest religious structures ever built. Forests of columns carved with hieroglyphs and painted in bright colours, courtyards open to the sky, inner sanctums where the god's statue resides, tended daily by the high priest. The walls are covered in reliefs, showing the king making offerings to the gods, smiting Egypt's enemies, performing rituals. These images are not just decoration, they're active, magical. The carved offering is a real offering. The carved victory is a real victory, made eternal by being inscribed in stone. You're not allowed into the inner parts of the temple. Only priests can enter there, but you can stand in the outer courtyard during festivals and you can see the god statue when it's brought out in procession, hidden inside a sacred bark, but present nonetheless. and you can make offerings at the smaller shrines that are accessible to ordinary people. You might bring a few loaves of bread, a jar of beer, a small faience amulet, and leave it with a prayer, asking for help with a problem, thanking the god for a blessing, seeking protection for your family. Religion in your world is not a once-a-week affair. It's woven into every day, every action. You say prayers when you wake, when you eat, when you start work. You wear amulets for protection. You make small offerings at household shrines. You avoid certain actions on certain days because they're unlucky. You observe taboos. Certain animals are sacred and cannot be eaten. Certain places are forbidden. The gods are everywhere, in the river, the sky, the animals, the king, the very land itself. And they are not distant, abstract beings. They are personal, immediate, involved in your life. They can help you or harm you. They respond to prayers, to offerings, to proper behavior. They can be angry, pleased, capricious, merciful. This might seem superstitious to a modern mind, but from your perspective, it's simply how the world works. The gods are real. You've seen their power in the flood, in the harvest, in the storms, in the lives and deaths of people around you. To ignore them would be insane, like ignoring gravity or fire. You live in a world charged with divine presence, and navigating it requires constant awareness, constant negotiation with the sacred. Now, let's talk about the great monuments, the pyramids and tombs that are perhaps the most famous symbols of ancient Egypt. By your time, the age of pyramid building is long past. The Great Pyramids at Giza are already ancient, built over 1,000 years before you were born, by kings whose names are half legend: Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure. These are the ancestors, the old ones, and their monuments are a source of awe and mystery even to you. How did they build them? The stories say magic, the gods themselves helping, the stones moved by spells and the will of the king. You don't know about ramps, levers, the tens of thousands of workers, organized with military precision. You just see the result, mountains of stone that have stood longer than memory. In your time, the kings are building different monuments, rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings, hidden away, sealed and protected by magic and secrecy. The goal is the same as it was with the pyramids, to ensure the king's safe passage to the afterlife, to preserve his body and his treasures for eternity. But the methods have changed, adapted to a new era, new threats, new understandings of the afterlife. The tombs are filled with images and texts, the Book of the Dead, spells and instructions for navigating the underworld, scenes of the king in the presence of the gods, offering and receiving blessings. You will never see the inside of a royal tomb. They're forbidden, sacred spaces, and after the king is buried, they're sealed and guarded. But you know they exist, and you know that the king's immortality depends on them. And maybe you've worked on one, part of a crew hauling stone, plastering walls, carrying supplies. The work is hard, exhausting, but it's also an honor, a service to the king and to Egypt, and you're paid for it, fed and housed, given beer and bread in quantities you'd never see at home, and when the walk is done, you return to your village with stories, with a sense of having been part of something grand. Let's slow down now, as the day itself is slowing down. We've covered a lot of ground, walked through the morning and the midday heat, through work and food and the structures of belief and power. Now the sun is getting lower, the light turning golden, the heat starting to ease. This is one of the most beautiful times of day in Egypt, when the harshness softens, when the landscape glows. You're back at your house, the day's work done. Your wife is preparing the evening meal, more bread, some lentils cooked with onions, a bit of dried fish. The smell of cooking mingles with the smoke from the fire. Children are playing nearby, their voices high and excited. Neighbors are out, sitting in their doorways, talking, calling greetings to each other. There's a sense of community, of shared life, that's hard to describe but easy to feel. You know these people. You've known them all your life. Their joys are your joys. Their sorrows are your sorrows. When someone dies, everyone mourns. When a child is born, everyone celebrates. You sit on your stool, watching the sky change color, feeling the day's exhaustion in your muscles. Tomorrow will bring more of the same: work, heat, the endless cycle of tasks that keep you alive. But right now, in this moment, there's peace. The bread is baking, The children are healthy. The river is rising as it should. You've done your work, paid your taxes, honored the gods. You're part of the order, part of Ma'at, and as long as that holds, as long as the river flows and the sun rises, life will continue. As darkness falls, the village quiets. Lamps are lit, casting a soft glow through doorways and windows. You eat your meal, simple but satisfying. Afterward, you sit outside for a while, looking up at the stars. The same stars your ancestors looked at. The same stars your children will look at. The sky is vast and clear, unpolluted by artificial light, and the stars are so numerous, they seem to form a second landscape, a mirror of the earth. You think about the day, the small dramas and routines. You think about your father, long dead, and whether he's found his place in the field of reeds. You think about your children, and what kind of life they'll have. Will the floods be good? Will the king be strong? Will there be peace? You have no way of knowing. The future is hidden, known only to the gods. All you can do is live each day, do your work, honor the traditions, and hope. Eventually, you go inside. You lie down on your mat, your wife beside you, your children nearby. The house is dark except for the faint glow of the lamp. Outside, you can hear the river. Always the river. The sound of water moving. The sound that has lulled generations to sleep. You close your eyes. Your breathing slows. The day releases you and you drift into sleep, into dreams that might be messages from the gods or might be nothing, just the mind's way of processing the day. And while you sleep, the world continues. The stars wheel overhead. The river flows. In the great cities, priests are performing midnight rituals, ensuring that Ra will defeat Apophis and the sun will rise again. In the desert, jackals howl. In the marshes, birds settle into the reeds. In the palace, the king, the living god, is also sleeping, or perhaps he's awake, burdened by responsibilities you can't imagine, the weight of maintaining Ma'at for all of Egypt. But these are not your concerns. Your world is small, bounded by the village and the fields and the nearby town. Within that world, you have everything you need: food, shelter, family, community, a place in the order of things. Life is hard, but it's also rich, full of small pleasures and deep meanings, and you wouldn't know how to imagine it any other way. Let's continue our journey, because we've only scratched the surface. There are so many more layers to explore, so many more details that bring this world to life. Let's talk about crafts, about the skilled artisans who create the objects that fill daily life, and the monumental art that will last for millennia. In a village like yours, there are specialists. Not everyone is a farmer. There's the potter, who shapes clay on a wheel or by hand into jars, bowls, cups, plates. His workshop is a small building filled with the earthy smell of wet clay. The floor littered with shards from broken pieces. He knows how to find the best clay along the riverbank, how to mix it with temper to prevent cracking, how to shape it, how to fire it in a kiln heated with dung and wood. His work is essential. Without pots, you can't store grain, water, oil. Without plates and bowls, eating is difficult. His products are simple, functional, but some are beautiful, decorated with painted designs or incised patterns. Then there's the weaver, usually a woman, who spins flax into thread and weaves the thread into linen. Spinning is done with a drop spindle, a simple tool that's been used for thousands of years. Efficient and portable, you can spin while walking, while watching children, while talking. The thread is then woven on a loom, either a ground loom, horizontal staked to the earth, or a vertical loom, more advanced, allowing for more complex patterns. Weaving is skilled work, requiring attention and patience. The result is linen in various grades, from coarse cloth for sacks and work clothes to fine, almost transparent fabric for the wealthy. There's the carpenter, working with the limited wood available: acacia, tamarisk, sycamore fig. Good timber is rare and expensive, imported from Lebanon, so it's used sparingly for important pieces. Doors, shrine boxes, furniture for the rich. The carpenter's tools are simple but effective: copper saws, chisels, adzes, drills. He shapes wood into beds, chairs, chests, coffins. Some of his work is purely functional. Some is beautiful, inlaid with ivory or ebony, carved with intricate designs. The metalworker, another specialist, works with copper and bronze, smelting ore in small furnaces, casting tools, weapons, jewelry. He knows the magic of fire and transformation, how to take stone and turn it into metal, how to shape the metal into useful forms. Iron is known but rare, not yet common. Gold is precious, controlled by the state, but he might work with it occasionally, making jewelry for a wealthy client, beaten thin and shaped into earrings, bracelets, amulets. All these crafts require years of apprenticeship. A boy starts learning from his father, or a master, watching, imitating, practicing. He makes mistakes, ruins materials, gets scolded, tries again. Slowly, over years, he becomes competent, then skilled, then perhaps a master himself, able to teach the next generation. There's pride in this, in making something well, in having a skill that others need, in producing objects that will outlast you. And then there are the artists, the scribes and painters and sculptors who create the monumental art that defines Egypt in the historical imagination. These are not people from your village. They're specialists trained in workshops attached to temples or palaces, part of a highly organized labor force. But you might know someone who went to work in such a workshop, or you might see the results of their work when you visit a temple. The creation of a temple relief or a tomb painting is a complex process. First, the surface is prepared, smoothed, plastered if necessary. Then the scribes draw a grid, a system of proportions that ensures the figures are correctly sized and positioned. This is not freehand art. It's highly formalized, following rules that have been established for centuries. The human figure is shown in a distinctive way: head in profile, eye from the front, shoulders from the front, torso turning, hips and legs in profile. This looks strange to modern eyes, but it's not a lack of skill. It's a deliberate choice, a way of showing the most characteristic view of each body part, creating an image that's clear and readable, that conveys information rather than creating an illusion of three-dimensional space. Once the grid is drawn, the outline is sketched in red ochre. A master artist might do this, or it might be done by a senior apprentice. The sketch is then corrected, adjusted, perfected, using black ink for the final outline. Then come the sculptors, if it's a relief, carefully carving away the background, creating raised or sunken figures. This is painstaking work, done with copper chisels and wooden mallets, the stone dust filling the air, the sound of tapping echoing through the chamber. Finally, the painters take over. The colors are made from natural pigments: red and yellow ochre, white from gypsum or chalk, black from soot, blue from lapis lazuli or manufactured frit, green from malachite. These pigments are ground into powder, mixed with water and a binder, and applied with brushes made from reeds. The result, when fresh, is vibrant, almost garish, a riot of color that fills the dark interior of the tomb or temple with life. The scenes depicted are varied: the king making offerings, smiting enemies, hunting, performing rituals; the deceased, if it's a tomb, shown in the afterlife, receiving offerings, enjoying the pleasures of the field of reeds. Daily life scenes: farming, fishing, baking, brewing, all the activities that will magically continue in the afterlife because they're depicted. These images are not art for art's sake. They're functional, magical, essential for the deceased's survival in the next world. Hieroglyphs accompany the images because writing is itself an art and a magic. The hieroglyphic script is incredibly complex, a mix of logographic and phonetic signs with hundreds of individual characters. Learning to read and write hieroglyphs takes years, and scribes are a privileged class. They serve the state as administrators, keeping records, writing letters, composing texts. They serve the temples as ritualists, copying sacred texts, ensuring that prayers and spells are transmitted accurately. And they serve the elite as creators of tomb inscriptions, recording names, titles, deeds, prayers. The script itself is beautiful, each hieroglyph a tiny work of art. Birds, animals, plants, tools, geometric shapes, all precisely drawn. Writing is not just communication, it's power. The name written gives identity, permanence. The spell written has magical force. To erase a name, to deface an inscription, is to attack the person's existence, to threaten their afterlife. Conversely, to preserve a name, to speak it, to write it, is to keep the person alive. This reverence for the written word For the image is fundamental to Egyptian thought. The world is made of symbols, and to manipulate the symbols is to manipulate reality. A statue is not a representation of the king. It is the king, in a sense, a vessel for his K, his life force. An offering table carved with images of food is not a decoration. It magically provides food for the deceased. This is sympathetic magic on a grand scale, a world view where the boundary between the real and the represented is porous. Let's shift now to another aspect of life that's easy to overlook but fundamentally important: time. You experience time differently than we do. You don't have clocks, not mechanical ones. You measure time by the sun, by the stars, by the seasons, by the reign of kings. The day is divided into rough periods: morning, midday, afternoon, evening, night, but not into hours and minutes. You know when it's time to stop work, because the sun is at a certain position, because the heat is unbearable, because your body tells you. The year is divided into 3 seasons based on the agricultural cycle: Akhet, the inundation; Peret, the emergence, when the fields emerge from the water and planting begins; and Shemu, the harvest. Each season lasts about 4 months, each month about 30 days, with a few extra days added at the end of the year to align with the solar year. The Egyptian calendar is one of the earliest solar calendars, a remarkable achievement, and it's used for administrative and religious purposes, coordinating the timing of festivals, tax collection, construction projects. But there's also a sense of cyclical time, of eternal return. The sun rises and sets, dies and is reborn every day. The river floods and recedes every year. The king dies and is replaced by a new king who is also Horus, also the living god. History is not a linear progression towards some future goal. It's a circle, a repetition of patterns established at the creation, when the gods first ordered the world. The goal is not progress but stability, the maintenance of Ma'at, the preservation of the order against the forces of chaos. This gives life a certain timeless quality. You do what your parents did, what their parents did, what people have always done. Change happens, of course. New kings bring new policies. Foreign invasions disrupt the order. Technologies slowly improve, but the underlying patterns remain. The river floods. The grain is planted. The harvest is gathered. The taxes are paid. The gods are honored. Life continues. And within this cyclical time, there are moments of danger. Liminal times when the boundaries between order and chaos are thin. The 5 epigomenal days at the end of the year, added to make the calendar align with the solar year, are considered unlucky, dangerous. The transition between seasons, between the old year and the new, is a time of vulnerability. The death of a king is a cosmic crisis, resolved only when the new king is crowned and performs the rituals that prove his legitimacy. Rituals, in fact, are one of the primary ways you engage with time. They mark transitions, both personal and communal. Birth rituals welcome a new life into the community. Coming-of-age rituals for boys and girls mark the transition to adulthood. Marriage rituals bind 2 people, 2 families together. Funerary rituals ensure the deceased's safe passage to the afterlife. And annual festivals mark the turning of the year, the return of the gods, the renewal of the world. These rituals are not empty formalities. They're powerful, transformative events. They change the status of the participants. A boy who undergoes initiation is no longer a child. A king who performs the said festival, a ritual of renewal, is revitalized, his reign extended. The community that celebrates the Opet festival renews its connection to the gods and to each other. Through ritual, you step out of ordinary time into sacred time, into the time of the gods, the time of creation, and you return transformed, renewed, reconnected. Let's talk now about something we haven't explored much: the role of women. In your village, women's lives are centered around the home and the family. But that doesn't mean they're powerless or invisible. Women manage the household, a complex task that includes food production, child rearing, textile production, and economic management. A woman might buy and sell goods in the local market, barter surplus produce for things the family needs, make loans, collect debts. She has legal rights. She can own property, inherit, divorce, testify in court. These rights are not universal in the ancient world, and Egyptian women, especially in the lower classes, have a surprising degree of autonomy. There are also roles for women outside the home. Some are professional mourners, hired to wail and lament at funerals, performing the emotional labor that helps the community process grief. Some are musicians and dancers, performing at banquets, festivals, and religious ceremonies. Some are priestesses, serving in temples, performing rituals, especially in the cults of goddesses like Hathor or Isis. These roles carry respect, status, sometimes significant economic reward. And then there are the elite women, the wives and daughters of officials, the royal women. These women have considerable power, behind the scenes if not always openly. They manage estates, influence appointments, act as regents for young kings, and occasionally, very occasionally, a woman becomes king herself, ruling in her own right. Hatshepsut is the most famous example, a queen who declared herself pharaoh, ruled for over 20 years, built monuments, led expeditions, and was depicted in the traditional regalia of the male king, complete with the false beard. Such women are exceptional, but they reveal that the system, for all its male dominance, has flexibility. Power is about capability, about connection, about divine sanction, and sometimes a woman can claim all three. For most women, though, power is exercised in smaller, more personal ways, in the management of the household, in the raising of children, in the networks of kinship and obligation that bind the community together. Childhood too deserves attention. Children in your world are valued, loved, protected, but they're also expected to contribute. By the age of 5 or 6, a child is helping with simple tasks, fetching water, scaring birds away from the fields, gathering fuel. By 10 or 12, they're doing real work, learning the skills they'll need as adults. There's no concept of a prolonged, carefree childhood. Life is too hard, labor too essential. But there's still play, still affection, still the sense that children are precious, a gift from the gods, the future of the family and the community. Toys, as we mentioned, exist, and they're not just crude objects. Some are quite sophisticated, dolls with movable limbs, toy animals on wheels, balls, tops. Children play games, some of which we can recognize, a form of leapfrog, tug of war, various ball games. They swim in the river, though always with the awareness of danger, crocodiles, hippos, strong currents. They explore, they get into trouble. They learn through experience, often painful experience, what's safe and what's not. Education, for most children, is informal, learned by observation and imitation. But for some, especially boys destined for the scribal profession, there's formal schooling. These boys are sent to temple schools or scribal academies, where they spend years learning to read and write, studying classic texts, practicing arithmetic, learning the skills they'll need as administrators. The education is rigorous, sometimes harsh. Beatings are used to enforce discipline based on the belief that a boy's ear is on his back, meaning he listens best when struck. This seems cruel to modern sensibilities, but it reflects the high value placed on education, the understanding that literacy is power, a pathway out of manual labor and into the elite. Let's return now to the river, because we can never stray too far from it. The Nile is not just a source of water and fertile soil, it's a highway, the primary means of transportation in a land where overland travel is difficult. Boats are everywhere, small reed skiffs used for fishing and short trips, larger wooden boats for transporting goods and people, elaborate barks for the gods and the king. Sailing is easy in one direction, north with the current. Going south against the current, you use sails catching the prevailing north wind. This combination of current and wind makes travel efficient, and is one of the reasons Egypt is so unified, so centralized. The king's orders can travel from Memphis to Aswan in a matter of days. Troops can be moved quickly. Grain can be shipped from south to north to feed the cities. The boats themselves are marvels of construction. The earliest are made from papyrus reeds, bundled and lashed together, light and buoyant, still used for small-scale fishing. Wooden boats are more complex, built from short planks of acacia or sycamore, fitted together with mortise and tenon joints, lashed with rope, caulked with resin. The largest boats, built for transporting obelisks or colossal statues, are massive, requiring huge crews, sophisticated engineering, magical protection for the journey. River travel is part of daily life. You've been on boats many times, ferrying across the river, traveling to the nearby town for a festival, maybe once on a longer journey, visiting a distant relative, or going to the regional capital to pay taxes. The experience is both mundane and magical. The gentle rocking of the boat, the sound of water against the hull, the changing perspective as you move along the river, seeing your village from a distance, realizing how small it is, how vast the world beyond. And the river is full of life, not just fish but hippos, dangerous and aggressive, capable of capsizing a boat or killing a person with a single bite. Crocodiles lurking in the shallows, patient predators. You respect these animals, fear them, but you also hunt them, carefully, ritually, because their hides are valuable. Their teeth are used for amulets. The river is a source of life and a source of danger, and you navigate it with a mix of confidence and caution, knowing that the gods can be generous or cruel, depending on factors beyond your control. Now let's talk about law and justice, because even in a world governed by divine kings and cosmic order, disputes arise and they need to be resolved. There are no lawyers in the modern sense, no formal legal code written down like Hammurabi's code in Mesopotamia. Instead, there are customs, precedents, the concept of mart, and local councils of elders who hear disputes and make judgments. If you have a problem with a neighbor, a dispute over a boundary, a debt unpaid, a theft, you bring it before the local council. These are respected men, elders, known for their fairness and knowledge of custom. They listen to both sides. They call witnesses. They examine evidence. Then they make a decision based on what they believe is in accordance with ma'at, with justice and balance. The decision is binding, enforced by social pressure, by the threat of ostracism, or, in serious cases, by physical punishment. For more serious crimes, murder, major theft, treason, there are state officials, judges appointed by the king, who dispense justice in the king's name. Punishments can be harsh: beatings, mutilation, forced labor, execution. The goal is not rehabilitation but retribution, the restoration of ma'at through the punishment of the wrongdoer. But there's also an understanding that mercy is part of justice, that mitigating circumstances matter, that the punishment should fit the crime. Interestingly, oaths and curses play a role in legal proceedings. If evidence is lacking, a person might be required to swear an oath before the gods, calling down divine punishment if they're lying. This is not a formality. It's believed that the gods will punish perjury, perhaps not immediately, but eventually, in this life or the next. The fear of divine retribution is a powerful deterrent, more effective in some ways than human punishment. Women, as we mentioned, have legal rights. A woman can bring a case to court, defend herself, own property, make contracts. In cases of divorce, she's entitled to a portion of the marital property, a kind of ancient alimony. Children born to a marriage are legitimate, with inheritance rights. Children born outside marriage have fewer rights, but they're not completely disenfranchised. The system is practical, designed to maintain social order, to ensure that families are stable, that property passes smoothly from one generation to the next. Slavery exists, but it's not the plantation slavery of later eras. Slaves are usually prisoners of war, foreigners, or people who've sold themselves into servitude to pay debts. Their property, yes, but they have some rights. They can own possessions, make contracts, even buy their freedom. Some slaves are household servants, living alongside the family, treated almost as members. Others work on large estates or in temples, part of a labor force that's more like serfdom than chattel slavery. It's an unjust system by modern standards, but within the context of the ancient world, it's not unusually brutal. Let's slow down again, because we've been moving quickly through all these topics, and the point of this journey is not to rush, but to linger, to let the details accumulate until you can almost feel the texture of this ancient life. Imagine again that you're there, in your village, and it's evening. The sun has set. The sky is darkening from blue to indigo to black. The stars are emerging one by one, then in clusters, then in vast glowing rivers of light. You're sitting outside your house, the day's work done, your belly full of bread and lentils, your body tired but content. Your wife is beside you, holding your youngest child, a baby who's just fallen asleep, mouth slightly open, breathing soft and even. Your other children are playing quietly nearby, Their energy finally winding down. Neighbors are out too, sitting in doorways, talking in low voices. Someone is playing a flute, a simple melody that drifts through the warm evening air. The fire has burned down to coals, glowing red in the darkness. You can smell the smoke mixed with the scent of the river, the damp earth, the crushed greenery where the children have been playing. A dog barks somewhere, then stops. A donkey brays, a harsh sound that fades into silence. Frogs are croaking by the river, a rhythmic chorus that rises and falls. You think about the day, the work on the roof, the bread your wife made, the conversation with your neighbor about the upcoming festival. Small things, ordinary things, but they make up the fabric of your life. You think about your father, who used to sit in this same spot, who taught you to repair a roof, to read the signs of the flood, to honor the gods. You think about your children, and you hope they'll have good lives, that the river will be generous, that the king will be wise, that the gods will be merciful. The stars are fully out now, more stars than you can count, scattered across the sky like grain scattered on a threshing floor. You recognize some of the patterns, the ones your father showed you. The constellation that marks the beginning of the flood season, the bright star that's associated with Isis, the path of the sun god's night journey. The sky is a mystery, but also a comfort, a reminder that the world is ordered, that the gods are watching, that the cycle will continue. Eventually, you go inside. You lie down on your mat, your family around you. The house is dark, the only light, the faint glow from a neighbor's lamp visible through the window. Outside, the sounds of the night continue. The frogs, the river, the distant call of a night bird. You close your eyes. Your breathing slows. The day releases its hold on you and you drift into sleep. And while you sleep, the world continues its ancient rhythms. The river flows northward, carrying silt and life. The stars wheel across the sky, marking the passage of time. In the great temples, priests are performing rituals, ensuring that the sun will rise, that Ma'at will prevail, that Egypt will endure. In the palace, the king sleeps or lies awake, burdened by the weight of divinity. In the desert, jackals hunt. In the marshes, hippos graze. The world is full of life, of danger, of beauty, of mystery. And you, in your small village, in your mud brick house, are part of it all. You are a thread in the vast tapestry of Egyptian civilization, a civilization that will last for 3,000 years, longer than any other in human history. You don't know this. You don't think in terms of millennia. You think in terms of seasons, of lifetimes, of the span from birth to death to rebirth in the field of reeds. But you are part of something immense, something that will leave a mark on human history that will never be erased. The pyramids will stand. The temples will endure. At least some of them, at least for a while. The hieroglyphs will be carved in stone, waiting for future generations to decipher. The mummies will be preserved, bodies lasting thousands of years, waiting in the darkness of their tombs. And the river will continue to flow, as it always has, as it always will, the heart of Egypt, the giver of life. But all of that is beyond your concern. Your world is here, now, in this village, with these people, doing this work, honoring these gods, living this life. And that is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. As you drift deeper into sleep, perhaps you dream. In your dream, you're standing by the river at dawn. The water is calm, reflecting the pink and gold of the sky. You step into the water, and it's cool and welcoming. You wade deeper, and the water rises around you, not threatening, but embracing. You look down and see fish swimming around your legs, silver and quick. You look up and see a boat approaching, a beautiful boat with a sail like a bird's wing. A figure stands in the boat, tall and radiant, and you know without being told that this is a god, come to visit, come to bless. The boat glides closer, and the god speaks, but you can't hear the words, just the sound, like music, like water, like wind, and you feel a sense of peace, of rightness, of being exactly where you're supposed to be. The god raises a hand in blessing, and the boat moves on, gliding away down the river, disappearing into the light. You wake for a moment, just a brief moment, and you hear the familiar sounds of the night. You feel your wife's warmth beside you, hear your child's soft breathing, and you smile though no one can see, and you close your eyes again and let sleep take you back into the dream, back into the river, back into the eternal flow of life that has no beginning and no end. And there, in that place between waking and sleeping, between the real and the imagined, you are at peace. The burdens of the day are gone. The worries about the future are forgotten. There is only this moment, this breath, this slow drift into darkness and rest. And outside, the stars continue their slow wheel across the sky. The river continues its eternal journey to the sea. The gods continue their watch over the land and the people. And Egypt, ancient and eternal, continues to exist, a civilization built on stone and belief, and the patient labor of millions of people just like you, living and dying and being reborn, century after century, millennium after millennium, until finally, long after you're gone, long after your children's children's children are gone, the last hieroglyph is carved, the last temple is built, and the long story of pharaonic Egypt comes to an end. But that ending is unimaginably far in the future. Right now, you sleep, and the world is as it has always been, and as it will always be, forever and ever. Now let's dive deeper into the world of festivals, because these moments of collective celebration are when your world truly comes alive in ways that transcend the daily routine. The festivals aren't just breaks from work, they're the heartbeat of the community, the moments when the divine becomes visible and tangible, when the boundaries between this world and the next grow thin. The Pet Festival, celebrated in Thebes during the season of Akhet when the floodwaters are at their peak, is one of the grandest. It lasts for weeks, sometimes even a month, and it involves a procession of the god Ammon from his temple at Karnak to the temple at Luxor, a journey of about 2 miles along a broad avenue lined with Sphinx statues. But it's not a simple walk. The god's statue, hidden within a sacred bark, is carried by dozens of priests on their shoulders. The bark is draped in fine linen, decorated with gold and precious stones, and it sways gently as the priests move in synchronized steps. You've traveled to Thebes to witness this, joining thousands of others from villages throughout the region. The crowd is enormous, pressing close to the procession route, everyone trying to catch a glimpse of the sacred bark as it passes. The air is thick with incense, clouds of it billowing from censers swung by junior priests walking alongside the procession. Musicians play sistrums, harps, drums, and flutes, creating a wall of sound that seems to vibrate in your chest. Singers chant hymns in voices trained to project over the crowd. As the bark approaches, people around you begin to shout, calling out to the god, asking for blessings, for health, for prosperity. Some are weeping, overcome by the moment. Others are laughing, drunk on beer that's been distributed freely from temple stores. Children are hoisted onto shoulders to see better. An old woman beside you is murmuring prayers, her hands clasped together, her eyes closed, when the bark passes directly in front of you. Close enough that you could almost touch it if the guards would allow, you feel something shift inside. It's hard to explain. The rational part of your mind knows it's a statue, knows it's carried by men, knows the whole thing is staged and choreographed. But another part of you, the part that's been shaped by stories and rituals and the collective belief of everyone around you, feels the presence of something else, something vast and ancient and powerful. For just a moment, the god is real, is here, is looking at you. The procession moves on, and the crowd flows with it, following the bark all the way to Luxor Temple. The journey takes hours, along the walls, and you can win the procession stops, where offerings are made, where additional rituals are performed. At each stop, the crowds press closer, and the singing grows louder. By the time the bark reaches Luxor Temple and disappears inside the sanctuary, you're exhausted, your throat raw from shouting, your feet aching from standing and walking. But you're also exhilarated, filled with a sense of having participated in something momentous. The festival continues for days after. There are public feasts where beer and bread are distributed to everyone. There are performances, acrobats and dancers entertaining the crowds. There are mock battles reenacting the king's victories over Egypt's enemies. And at night, there's music and dancing that continues until dawn. Normal rules are relaxed. People drink more than usual, flirt more openly, speak more freely. It's a time out of time, a brief window when the usual hierarchies and restrictions are loosened, when joy is not just permitted, but mandated. Other festivals mark different moments in the sacred and agricultural calendar. The beautiful Feast of the Valley, held during the dry season, is a festival of the dead. Families cross to the west bank of the Nile, to the necropolis where their ancestors are buried, and they spend the night at the tombs. It's not a somber occasion. They bring food and beer. They eat and drink with the dead, symbolically sharing a meal with those who have passed on. There's music and laughter. Children play among the tombs. The dead are still part of the family, still loved, still included in these moments of celebration. The festival of drunkenness, held in honor of the goddess Hathor, is exactly what it sounds like. The myth tells how Hathor, in her fierce form as the lioness Sekhmet, nearly destroyed humanity in a rage. Ra, the sun god, tricked her by dyeing beer red to look like blood. Sekhmet drank it, became drunk, and forgot her rage, transforming back into the benevolent Hathor. So the festival reenacts this myth through excessive drinking, music, and dancing. It's a ritual of release, of channeling destructive energy into celebration, of reminding everyone that even the gods can be wild and unpredictable. During this festival, you drink until the world spins, until you forget your worries and your pains, until all that exists is the music and the movement and the faces of those around you, also lost in the same ecstatic release. The next day you'll wake with a pounding headache and hazy memories, and you'll swear you'll never drink that much again. But next year, when the festival comes around, you'll do it all over again, because this is part of the rhythm of life, part of the balance between order and chaos that Ma'at demands. Then there are the agricultural festivals that mark the turning of the seasons. The festivals celebrating the beginning of harvest, when the first sheaves of grain are cut and offered to the gods. The festival marking the end of harvest, when the granaries are full and everyone can breathe a little easier, knowing there will be food for the coming year. These are more local, celebrated in individual villages rather than in the great temples, but they're no less important. They bind the community together, remind everyone that their survival depends on the land and the river and the gods who control them. Let's talk now about medicine in more detail, because the intersection of practical knowledge and magical thinking in ancient Egyptian healing is fascinating. When you fall ill, when your child develops a fever, when your wife has a difficult childbirth, you turn to the swan, the physician, a specialist who has studied for years and knows both the practical remedies and the magical spells that healing requires. The physician arrives at your house carrying a bag of tools and ingredients. He examines the patient carefully, feeling the pulse, looking at the tongue and eyes, smelling the breath, asking questions about symptoms. This is diagnosis, and it's surprisingly sophisticated. Egyptian physicians recognized that different illnesses have different causes and require different treatments. They understood that the heart pumps blood through the body, that the pulse can indicate health or disease, that certain symptoms cluster together to form recognizable patterns. For a fever, the physician might prescribe willow bark tea, which you know from experience helps bring down the temperature and ease the aching. He might also make a poultice of honey and herbs to apply to the chest if there's congestion, but he also recites a spell, calling on the gods to drive out the demon or evil spirit causing the illness. He might write the spell on a piece of papyrus and tell you to dissolve it in water and drink it, consuming the magic along with the medicine. For a wound, the treatment is even more clearly a blend of practical and magical. The physician cleans the wound with water and wine, which has antiseptic properties, though he doesn't know why. He applies honey, which prevents infection. He might stitch the wound closed with a needle and thread, if it's deep, and he recites another spell, perhaps invoking Isis, who healed her son Horus, asking her to extend the same care to this patient. For childbirth, midwives are usually called rather than physicians. These are women with years of experience, who know the signs of normal and complicated labor, who know how to turn a baby in the womb if it's positioned wrong, who know which herbs can speed labor or ease pain, but they also use magic. Amulets are placed on the mother's belly or hung around her neck. Spells are recited to invoke Hathor and Taweret, goddesses who protect women in childbirth. The birthing chamber might be decorated with images of these goddesses, their presence invoked to ensure a safe delivery. When death comes despite all efforts, when the medicine and the magic both fail, it's understood as the will of the gods. The time appointed for that person has come, and no human effort can change it. This brings a certain acceptance, a way of making peace with the incomprehensible fact of death. It's not random, it's not meaningless, it's part of a larger order that you can't fully understand but must trust. Let's explore the afterlife beliefs in even greater depth, because they shape so much of how you live. The journey after death is perilous, full of dangers and challenges. The deceased must navigate through the duat, a shadowy underworld filled with demons, serpents, lakes of fire, and hostile spirits. To survive this journey, you need knowledge, magical spells that allow you to pass each obstacle. This is why the Book of the Dead exists. Collections of these spells written on papyrus scrolls and buried with the deceased, or inscribed on tomb walls and coffins. The wealthy can afford elaborate books of the dead, custom-made by scribes, beautifully illustrated, containing all the necessary spells. You can't afford that, but you know some of the spells, passed down orally, and you trust that speaking them at your funeral will give you at least some protection, and you have faith in the gods. In Osiris especially, the lord of the underworld, who was once mortal like you, who died and was resurrected, who understands what it means to be human. The ultimate test comes in the Hall of Two Truths, where Osiris sits in judgment. Your heart is removed from your body and placed on a scale opposite the feather of Ma'at, which represents truth and justice. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, operates the scale. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, records the result. Amit, the devourer, waits nearby, her crocodile jaws ready to consume the hearts of the guilty. If your heart is lighter than the feather, if you've lived a good life in accordance with Ma'at, you're welcomed into paradise. If your heart is heavy with sin, Almat devours it, and you cease to exist. A second death from which there is no return. This is the true terror, not death itself, but annihilation, the complete erasure of your being. So you try to live well. You try to be honest in your dealings, kind to your neighbors, generous to those in need. You fulfill your obligations to family and community. You honor the gods, not out of fear alone, though fear is part of it, but out of a genuine desire to be worthy, to earn your place in eternity. The field of reeds, the paradise that awaits the justified, is described as a perfect version of Egypt. The Nile floods at exactly the right time, every time. The crops grow without failure. There's no hunger, no thirst, no pain. You're reunited with loved ones who've gone before. You can enjoy all the pleasures of life, eating, drinking, making love, without any of the hardships, and you can work if you want, tending fields that always yield abundant harvests, or you can rest, letting the Shabti figures buried with you do the work in your place. These Shabtis are small figurines, mummiform, inscribed with a spell that brings them to life in the afterlife to serve as your laborers. The wealthy are buried with hundreds of them, an entire workforce to ensure they never have to lift a finger. You don't have Shabtis, but you hope that in the field of reeds, the work will be light and pleasant, more like the leisure activities you enjoy now than the back-breaking labor of the harvest. This vision of the afterlife is deeply comforting. Death is not an end but a transformation, a passage from one state of being to another. The body dies, but the K, the life force, continues. The Ba, the personality or soul, represented as a bird with a human head, can fly between the tomb and the afterlife, maintaining the connection between the living and the dead. As long as your name is remembered, as long as offerings are made at your grave, you continue to exist in some sense. This is why you've taught your children to remember you, to speak your name, to pour water on the ground at your gravesite. It's why you make offerings at your father's grave. Even though he's been dead for 20 years, you're keeping him alive, maintaining his existence in the afterlife, and someday your children will do the same for you. Now let's delve into the bureaucracy that makes this vast civilization function, because Egypt is not just a spiritual construct, it's an administrative marvel, a machine of record-keeping and tax collection and resource management that would impress any modern government. At the top is the king, of course, but he can't rule alone. He relies on a vast hierarchy of officials. The vizier is second in command, the king's right hand, responsible for overseeing all administrative functions. There are treasurers who manage the flow of goods into and out of royal storehouses. There are generals who command the army. There are high priests who oversee the temples, and below them are layers upon layers of lesser officials, each with specific responsibilities. These officials are all literate, all trained scribes. They spend their days writing and reading, keeping records of everything: the height of the flood, the amount of land under cultivation, the expected harvest, the taxes collected, the grain distributed, the workers assigned to projects, the supplies consumed, the tools issued. Every jar of oil, every basket of grain, every brick made, everything is counted and recorded on papyrus scrolls that are filed away in archives. This obsessive record-keeping serves multiple purposes. It allows the central government to manage resources efficiently, to move grain from areas of surplus to areas of shortage, to ensure that workers on royal projects are fed, that the army is supplied, that the temples have what they need for offerings and festivals. It also establishes accountability. If grain goes missing, the records can show who was responsible. If a field produces less than expected, the records can show whether it's because of a poor flood or because someone is cheating. For you, this bureaucracy is mostly invisible, except when the scribes come to assess your fields and collect taxes. But it's always there, a vast invisible structure that shapes your life in countless ways. The peace you enjoy, the absence of banditry and war, that's maintained by the army, which is fed by the granaries, which are filled by the taxes you pay. The festivals you attend, the temples you visit, they're supported by the same system. Even the justice you receive when you bring a dispute before the local council, that's part of the larger structure of Ma'at that the king and his officials maintain. Let's talk about Egypt's relationships with its neighbors, because Egypt is not isolated. It exists in a complex web of trade, diplomacy, and occasional warfare with other kingdoms and peoples. To the south is Nubia, a land rich in gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. Egypt has a long and complicated relationship with Nubia, sometimes trading peacefully, sometimes conquering and occupying, sometimes being invaded in turn. By your time, much of Nubia is under Egyptian control, administered by a viceroy appointed by the king. Gold flows north from Nubian mines to fill Egyptian treasuries. Nubian soldiers serve in Egyptian armies. Nubian princes are brought to Egypt to be educated and assimilated. To the northeast is the Levant, the land of Canaan and Syria, a region of city-states and small kingdoms. This is a crucial area for Egypt because it controls the trade routes that connect Egypt to the wider world. Through the Levant come goods from Mesopotamia, from Anatolia, from the Aegean, tin for making bronze, silver, lapis lazuli, cedar wood, olive oil, wine. Egypt trades grain, linen, papyrus, and gold for these goods. But the region is also contested. Other great powers, the Hittites especially, want control of these same trade routes, and conflicts arise. During times of strong kings, Egypt controls much of the Levant. Egyptian armies march north. Egyptian governors are installed in conquered cities. Tribute flows back to Egypt. But during times of weak kings, the empire contracts, and the Levantine cities assert their independence or ally with Egypt's rivals. This ebb and flow is constant, a rhythm of expansion and contraction that plays out over centuries. To the west is Libya, a land of desert nomads and pastoralists. The relationship here is often hostile. Libyan tribes raid Egyptian settlements, seeking grain and goods. Egyptian armies retaliate, pushing the raiders back into the desert. Some Libyans are captured and settled in Egypt as workers or soldiers. Over time, some Libyan families become integrated into Egyptian society, even rising to positions of power. And beyond these immediate neighbors, Egypt has contacts with more distant lands. Ships sail to Punt, a land somewhere on the African coast, perhaps modern Somalia or Eritrea, to bring back incense, myrrh, exotic woods, gold, and live animals like baboons and leopards. Traders from the Aegean, the Minoans, and later the Mycenaeans bring olive oil, wine, and decorated pottery. There are even occasional contacts with Mesopotamia, the land of the Tigris and Euphrates, though the distance is great and the journey dangerous. These international relationships bring exotic goods and new ideas into Egypt, but they also bring challenges. Foreign invasions, periods when Egypt is conquered and ruled by foreigners. The Hyksos from the Levant, later the Libyans, later still the Nubians, eventually the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, but those conquests are in the future, some near, some far. For now, Egypt is strong, the greatest power in the known world, and you feel pride in that, even though your own life is small and local. Let's return to the village one more time, to the intimate scale of daily life, because for all the grandeur of temples and kingdoms, your world is really the few acres you farm, the cluster of houses where you live, the faces you see every day. Your neighbor across the path, the one with the limp from an old injury, is arguing with his wife again. Their voices carry through the thin walls, sharp and angry. You can't make out the words, but you know the pattern. He drinks too much beer. She complains about it. He gets defensive. She gets angrier. Eventually, one of them storms out, and there's silence for a while, and then they make up, and the cycle repeats. It's been this way for years. Everyone knows. No one interferes unless the violence becomes serious, and even then, only to pull them apart, to cool things down. Marriage is hard. Life is hard. You make allowances. The old woman who lives alone in the corner house. Her children grown and moved away. Her husband dead for a decade. She's becoming forgetful. Sometimes she wanders out at night, confused about where she is. The village watches over her, gently guiding her home, making sure she eats, keeping the fire lit in her house so she doesn't freeze on cold nights. When she dies, which might be soon, her children will come back for the funeral, and the house will be passed to a younger family,